Hi, my name is Olivia Manning, and this is my Ocean Awakening collection, inspired by Thalassophobia and Thealassophilia, which is the fear and fondness of the ocean. This collection is inspired by getting stuck in a rip current this past summer while lifeguarding, and going through the phases of fight or flight to get out of it. Once I was out of it, I had this feeling of awakening and empowerment, realizing how powerful the ocean is while I was in its arms. Reflecting on this traumatic experience, I realized the symbolic nature of it and how everyone goes through a traumatic experience in their life. This collection visually shows those phases and what goes on during an experience like this. Here's my concept board where I collected various images that I was inspired by about the ocean that evoked fear and mystery as well as fondness and beauty. This collection is inspired by the phases of the drowning and rescue situation, and the prints throughout this collection shows what one goes through while stuck in a rip current and in fight or flight. This collection is for fashion, mostly existing in a female market. The aesthetic for this collection is for someone who has no problem standing out from the rest and wearing something truly unique and evocative. This collection works just with that by visually representing fears and choosing not to hold on to them on the inside, but to release them and present themselves on the human form. On the left is my concept board, where I chose to grab images of seaweed and water, as well as cyanotype photography, and use those as the forefront inspiration for my colorways. Diving into this collection, I started with an emphasis on the blues of the ocean. Fear of the blues. When I was experiencing the rip current, all I could think about was how much blue ocean was around me and how the depths were all-encompassing. With that, I decided to focus on the movement of the water to articulate the feeling of being stuck out and away from the shore. This print on the top left shows waves and riptides colliding all into one another, giving you a feeling of being stuck and trapped between the waves. On the right is the final repeat, where all the waves are seamlessly fitting into one another, and you can feel the movement of the waves about to crash at various parts of the design. On the bottom left is two cyanotype photography pieces that I made to show the depth of the blues of the ocean. The left is a bubble wrap motif and then exposed to show the light shining through the surface and the darkness below it. The right cyanotype uses mylar and string as the photograms to show the look of jellyfish under the water in a simple color palette of white and blue to articulate this. From the original cyanotypes of jellyfish, more jellyfish were created on fabric and watercolor paper to create croquis. This is seen on the right. The left is the final jellyfish repeat, which shows the darkness of the ocean below, and then the light jellyfish as well, appearing as though they are stinging. The proximity to the jellyfish to each other represent the fear the designer had of the unknown underwater and what could possibly be hurting her and close to her. The colors represent that darkness of going deeper into the piece. Using alcohol dyes on Yupo paper, I was able to create the water-like textures shown here. Using alcohol dyes, alcohol, and a straw on Yupo paper, I was able to apply the alcohol dyes and using a straw was able to blow them around as they were driving to create the different values such as the darkness, midtones, and highlights in this piece. This was done on the right at first using brown alcohol dyes and scanned and adjusted into Photoshop to make the left image of the blues just like the ocean. Delving deeper into and past the fear of the blues, there was more parts of the ocean that were fearful. I thought to delve deeper into the green and murky waters that can be prevalent in the ocean when one looks underwater. Here's a mood board moving forward, looking into how to show underwater scenes and the lighting that they possess. I wanted to show how creepy looking under the water can be and how that was what I was thinking about while I was stuck in the rip current if I had to go underwater. In these images are seaweed, caves, kelp forests, and images from the Harry Potter Goblet of Fire film, where they had a race in the Black Lake underwater and encountered sea creatures, things they feared, and things that harmed them, as well as difficult decisions that they had to make. At the bottom right is a large eye under someone's feet in the water that represents the thalassophobia, the fear of the ocean, from an article that I was reading. Delving into this concept, the idea of touching seaweed underwater was very important in articulating because the feeling of slimy seaweed is something that a lot of people fear when in the water. To make these seaweeds, I used Doc Martin dyes to create them and used my color palette as inspiration for the seaweeds I chose and how they wrapped around each other to show how they're almost nodding, and someone encountering these would be completely covered in them and stuck in them. Once I put these seaweed into repeat, I was focused on making the backgrounds that would make the prints feel like they were underwater. On the left is the blue background that I made using Doc Martin Dye Blue's Salt Sugar onto 25 by 40 inches of a sheet of watercolor paper. I then brought this into Photoshop and turned this print into black as seen on the bottom left to create a darker view of the ocean, closer and deeper to the midnight zone where little light is seen. Using these two backgrounds, I put them into a repeat, as well as having the seaweed repeated on the right as shown. Once the background of the blues and blacks were repeated, the seaweed was repeated on top of this design so that they could repeat and line up together. The designer then used color selection while the seaweed was on top of the background and selected the background areas, changing the colors of the original blues to green, deeper blues, and whites and yellows. This created more interest in the background as well as felt more realistic to looking underwater. I then took the seaweed from the repeat, and because the background behind the seaweed was not affected, it left imprints of the seaweed from the original background. This piece was entitled Confusion Remnants because of that, remnants on the ocean floor and imprints left on it in the design. In this moment, the designer was not yet panicked about the ocean when she was fearing the seaweed, but was confused as to what was happening to her when she started fearing touching seaweed underneath her. Using the black background, the designer put the seaweed strands on top of it, like the previous, and instead of changing the colors of the background, she decided to take away parts of the background so the original of the seaweed could shine through the lighter areas. The designer used the blending tool of multiply so that the seaweed interacted with the background as if it were in the same environment. That is why in some of the areas the color looks like a shadow in the print because it's picking up the color of the light and texture in the background, where some of the areas are their original colors showing shadows, but some are lighter backgrounds showing the true colors of the seaweed it was originally created as. On the left is a zoomed in version of the repeat. In the middle is showing the repeat, and on the right is a zoomed in version to see the light, dark, and salty textures that the piece has. Creating more seaweed designs, the seaweed bouquet was made so that it showed knots and connections of knots showing from on top of the ocean surface. On the bottom left is the original painting of the bouquet of seaweed, and behind it shows the seaweed in a 5-point bouquet, having the strands of seaweed connecting to one another outside of each bouquet. On the top right is the background that was made for this piece. The idea behind this piece was to have it appear as though one is looking up at the surface of the water and sees all the seaweed knots trying to get through to the surface and through it to take a deep breath. The background was made for this third darker area and lighter areas to show the shadows that the seaweed is making, as well as the negative space around the seaweed to shine light through the water. The bottom right is the final piece which articulates this, and the green murky waters really show how scary and mysterious being stuck under this water would be. After I started thinking about fearing touching seaweed underwater, I started to think about all the animals that were underneath the water, as well as fearing or seeing something in the water while I was stuck out in the current. Using alcohol dyes, the left image was created in greens to show this murky water-looking texture and feel. On the top right image, it shows alcohol dyes on watercolor to create an abstract eye that might be seen through the surface of the water of a sea creature underwater. I then used the left image as a background and changed the colors in Photoshop to a more yellowy green and started to put the background into repeat. The background of the previous image was turned into different colors of blue to show the blue water and eyes popping out onto the surface. This also has some parts of purple and white with it. On the top right is the green colorway, and only the pupils of the eyes show as light shining through to the surface from the eyes looking up at someone. The bottom right image is another colorway of the tangled seaweed repeat with more of a light blue and white lightness and darker shadows showing. This was actually created by using thinner printing paper that applied more ink onto the paper and created a darker colorway that had been done. From these experiences of the traumatic incident of being stuck in a rip current, I decided to make a print that represents each phase of the experience. To make my print designs come to life, I worked with a fashion designer named Vanessa Fath to collaborate with her and have my print designs turn into the human form in garments. Here is a quick view of the designs at the beginning stages to figure out what prints would be on which design, as well as how to create the silhouettes to work with the print designs and the phases that they were representing. Some of the silhouettes and designs are not exactly the same as the final, which will be shown in the next slides, but here's a sneak peek. For the first phase, naive, this fruit represents the inspiration. When going into the ocean, I thought that nothing would ever harm me, and I wouldn't or ever think I would be struggling in the ocean. I grew up a very strong swimmer, and during lifeguarding, I knew that I would be able to save people because I learned how to. However, I didn't know what I was about to face because I never had been stuck in a rip current myself. This print shows jellyfish inspired by the image on the right, which was captured at Eel Malk, which is an overgrown lake that used to be attached to a larger body of water, but because it is closed off, it now has no predators, and the jellyfish have no stingers because they don't have any predators. So they just keep repopulating. This is symbolic for how I thought of the ocean. I knew there were things that could harm people, but I didn't think that they would harm me. On the right is some jellyfish that I painted, as well as the background images of abstract jellyfish that I used in the background behind. I thought it would be great to do something fun and flirty to show the naiveness for the silhouette dress. The top represents a bathing suit-esque design, and looking at the flirty skirt, which will be shown in the next images. Here you can see the creation of this design with the most left image in the back being created by the two images in front of it of abstract jellyfish background. Then, adding the jellyfish from the previous page of the croquis, I apply these on top of the abstract background to reference Il Malk, the lake, and the abundance of golden jellyfish there. The colors also represent the fun, flirty, and lightheartedness. That's how I thought of the ocean before getting stuck in the rip current. The design was printed onto charmeuse fabric and then constructed into garment, which is a naive phase. This is the swing dress with a cross strap cutout bodice and a very flirty miniskirt. The second phase is confusion. This was part of the incident where I wasn't fully panicked, but I knew something was wrong and I was confused about how to go about it. This is the moment that I started somewhat thinking about my surroundings and what was underneath me. I thought about the seaweed and seaweed forest and the dark depths of the water where I couldn't touch the ground. The middle image is the repeat I chose for this phase. The right image is the pattern printed onto charmeuse fabric, and the left is a silhouette inspiration that was constructed with this print design. We wanted it to be a bit longer than the first to show the seaweed and make it feel like she was deeper into the ocean and deeper into her confusion about it. Here are the final garments of this confusion dress, and the different angles showing the original silhouette design becoming a seamless, straight mini dress with a large circle back cutout and a zipper up the front center. We designed it this way because due to the charmeuse fabric and it only being able to stretch on the bias and the weft, it did not stretch in the warp and would have been difficult to get it over the head without a lot of zippers. This dress makes you feel like you're living and seeing inside under the water, and the zipper connects to the idea of a wetsuit type design up the front center while revealing a little bit of herself with a cutout in the back, allowing for a nice silhouette with darts in the front bodice. For the third phase of the incident, these motifs were created. This phase represents panic when I completely went into fight or flight and tried running in the water to try and get myself out. These prints were made with alcohol dye and on mylar and Yupo paper, and the colors represent the different emotions and different feelings that I was experiencing at the time. The red represented anger and frustration as well as fearing being attacked by an animal. The deep blues and greens connected with the ocean and the fear of the blues under me. The brown and black represented the fear of darkness and depth if I had gone underwater and was unable to be found, and the yellow and orange were glimmers of hope from the sun shining on me from above. The silhouette design referenced this phase of the incident very well because my shoulders started to go underwater as I was freaking out. I was no longer treading water, I was propelling myself under while I was kicking, and I was so panicked. Although I never completely went underwater, this dress covering the shoulders represents my shoulders being weighed down by the water and showing my legs flailing underneath to try to keep myself alive. On the left is the final repeat half dropped, which is enlarged to be 25 inches tall and 40 inches wide of a repeat, where it was originally half of that. The enlarged size really references the colors and the way it shows on the body impacts that my mind was having in the fight or flight situation. This could be shown in the image on the right in the final garment. This is a bell-sleeved mini trapeze dress with a collar stand and shoulder cape layering. This print was printed onto neoprene scuba and connected to what people wear in the ocean for wetsuits, whether it be surfing, scuba diving, and more. In the middle is the final fabric, and then on the left and right are the front and side angle of the final garments. Cut fabric and garments is very free-flowing, and the colors pop on the neoprene, making it a very powerful statement piece. The fourth phase of the incident was resolution. This is when I went from panic mode of completely running in the water, treading, and fearing for my life, to starting to be able to think about my surroundings again and take a deep breath and reevaluate how to save myself. To this phase, it took about 15 minutes, which is usually or can be the amount of time that fight or flight starts to dissipate and the hormones produced in the fight or flight mode begin to wear off, where you can start to use your prefrontal cortex again to make decisions without your body fully in survival mode anymore. How this happened was I realized I could no longer continue doing what I was doing because it was not helping me at all. I looked up at the sky and took a deep breath in and out, and I was able to begin to relax my body. I started swimming slower and treading water again instead of fighting the water. I realized that my breath was the key to coming back to my senses and able to start thinking and remembering how to get out of a rip current and what I was needed to do. By the time this happened, the rip current wasn't as strong and I was able to swim to shore. On the right is how I started making motifs for this phase, and as the viewer looked up, it got lighter and into the sun to show the realization as resolution in this phase. I decided to articulate this by showing an octopus going from the bottom to top, revealing itself once it got closer to the top. On the left is the silhouette inspiration, which was thought of as the same time as creating the print so that they could be engineered and seamless into itself. The bottom left image is from fall 2020 in the Zimmerman lookbook, where they have an image on the bottom left and it's engineered to be a seamless repeat on either side and sew up the sides. We decided to take this as the octopus would be wrapping itself around the body and would ombre from bottom to top. This image combines the octopus that I designed and the ombre background that I created. I used Doc Marten dyes and salt to create both of these. The octopus I was inspired by was found in the film My Octopus Teacher. In this film, it follows the relationship between a scuba diver discovering an octopus and follows its life over a year. The creature is amazing at camouflaging into its surroundings for survival. Once it warms up to the scuba diver, it showed itself and didn't camouflage anymore, crawling into the scuba diver's hand and being playful and affectionate towards him. This symbolized my experience in the water, where I was camouflaging into my fears of the ocean and letting the fear take over my mind and forgetting how to be myself and all the knowledge that I had about the ocean and how to get through a rip current. I decided to show this with the octopus blending into and camouflaging at the bottom, and as it works its way up and stood out from the background. The octopus in Photoshop used the blending tools to use darker and blended the octopus into the background, camouflaging it, and as it got to the top, it was showing itself. The design repeats horizontally around, having the tentacles wrapped to the other side. Translating this design into the silhouette, I didn't want it to be two rectangles for the front and the back of the garment because it would have looked out of place in a lot of the top areas and wouldn't have looked as elegant. You can see in the second image over from the left and the one below it how this design was engineered and constructed to make the garment pattern shape that was required to sew it together seamlessly on each side. In Photoshop, the left and right side were split down the middle to have the front and the back of the dress. The top areas were shrunk using the warp tool, moving the top image from 42 inches wide to 20 inches wide on both the front and the back. This was repeated on the right side as well, and the image below shows how those two pieces fit together to still be seamlessly designed. To allow the seam allowance, the designer took the left image and put the back on either side and drew with a black dotted line 1 inch away from the design to allow to line up the seam allowance so that there wouldn't be white showing through the dress. The fashion designer then lined it up, but because the black line was created by me, it wasn't completely on the 1 inch mark on either side, and it needed to be hand sewn and hand tacked at first and then sewn on top of that to allow it to be seamless on either side, the left and the right. Resolution is an off-the-shoulder, seamless, floor-length A-line gown. Awakening is the final phase of the incident where, after resolution happened, I was able to realize and remember how to get through a rip current and save myself. I had this newfound understanding and respect for the power of the ocean and all that I had just experienced. I gained wisdom and awakening to understand not only the ocean, but myself and what I went through in fight or flight and a traumatic experience, and I learned what I will be able to do next time something like this occurs. For this print design, I wanted it to be lighter, happy, and ethereal, to connect with the sun being the hope throughout this whole collection. I wanted to show in the ocean floor cracks representing the breaking through of my old understandings of the ocean and myself, and the light shining through to represent enlightenment and awakening in this part of the phase. I decided to take one of my Seaweed Confusion Remnants paintings and alter the colors so that they were light, bright, and light blues, greens, and whites, yellows were the colors that connected this to the happier ocean view. Thinking of making this garment, I wanted to be almost transparent, representing the transparency I felt in this situation as well as the new wisdom and understanding that I learned. I decided I was going to use chiffon for the outside dress and a bodysuit that represent a bathing suit design underneath. On the left shows the final design showing the light ocean appearance and the cracks making from the white onto cardboard paper and putting salt onto it and then using Photoshop, using the blending tool to dissolve and make it feel like cracks as well as foam on the ocean surface. The image next to it is the final fabric printed onto chiffon, and then the image on the right is the final silhouette garment as well as a close-up on the bottom right. On the top left shows the bodysuit, which was done in suede neoprene fabric. The design, when it was in dye sublimation onto the fabric, only transferred lightness parts of the design, which works well to articulate the point of enlightenment and brightness at the core of myself at the end of this journey. Awakening is a draped, off-the-shoulder, high-slit, straight dress with a layered bandeau top and a high-waisted bottom. Here are all the dresses together: naive, confusion, panic, resolution, and awakening. This print, entitled Swimming, Floating, or Drowning, represents my experience being a lifeguard and looking out at the water. This print abstractly shows people swimming in the ocean. The idea behind it abstractly shows people swimming, articulating the feeling of being a lifeguard and trying to figure out the situation and the water conditions in the water. Before this traumatic incident, I thought that I was able to do a good job at looking out at the water, understanding everyone's situation and ability levels, knowing how many people were in the water, as well as looking for rip currents and strong currents that would make me need to take people out of the water or out of a certain area. However, after this incident, I feel like I have greatly gained much more experience and understanding of the ocean's power and looking out for characteristics of people struggling as well as trying to not show struggling and confusion from them and bringing that into my future lifeguard experiences as well as understanding other people's struggle and being empathetic and helping them. On the left shows my prints together as well as my concept board and motifs of fabric. Looking at them this way, you can see the strong color palette connections with each other as well as overall feeling of the collection showing the fear and fondness of the ocean. On the right is the final dresses hung up together at the beach while Naive is worn on the background. Here shows my lifelong love and fondness for the ocean. My dad was a swimmer, so he taught me to swim at a very young age, knowing that it's an important skill to have as well as to be safe. I am so grateful for that because my whole life I have absolutely loved going to the beach, swimming in the water, and that is why I have so many wonderful connections with the water and the family and friends in it. My relationship and appreciation for the environment around me has greatly increased over time through understanding the ocean. Although I got stuck in a rip current and I was very fearful for my life, I still absolutely love the ocean, and this experience has showed me a lot of knowledge and wisdom through it, and about the ocean showed me the importance of understanding the power of it, but not forgetting to enjoy it. Here are some photos of me from beach lifeguarding. I got stuck in a rip current the morning I was lifeguarding by myself for the first time, which made me very scared and almost embarrassed that I had freaked out so much while I was bringing out the buoy that morning and got stuck in the rip current because I was supposed to be able to save others, but I had never experienced being stuck in a rip current, so I didn't know what to do as well as I didn't have a flotation device with me. This experience really shows me that everyone can get stuck in a rip current and anyone can go into fight or flight, whether it be in the water, in the ocean, or any part in life, and how much it takes and drains you from being able to make decisions that you would have normally been able to make if you were calm. This collection is really about facing yourself and getting out of your own head and away from your fears to accomplish what you know you can do. This collection really articulates the trauma that everyone goes through in their life, whatever kind it may be and in whatever form. You go through phases that allow you to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about your environment around you. This collection has made me a stronger and more empathetic person, and I'm very grateful for that. A special thanks to my collaboration partner, Vanessa Fath, creating my print designs into the human form. She really went above and beyond with this collection for me, and I am so grateful for that. She is constantly passionate about making a difference, and the reason why she wanted to work on this collection was because it articulated something really true to the human experience and going through traumatic situations. Putting that into garments for the human form is really incredible to show the individuality and speak on behalf of going through the struggles and the journey of life in a beautiful way. Thank you so much for listening to my print collection Ocean Awakening presentation. My name is Olivia Manning, and I appreciate you watching this. You can find more of my work on my Instagram at Live Textiles, as well as my website portfolio at oliviamanning.myportfolio.com. Thank you to the Textile Design Department and my teachers and peers for allowing me to be my most creative self and believing in my work. I am so grateful for this program and the school for allowing us to be innovative, collaborative, and following our dreams. Thank you.